Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's edition of the Gotta Pop podcast. My name is Buddy Gott, and my guest today is my friend, a very talented writer named Sarah Paris. Welcome to the show, Sarah.
Thanks. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you here. I love reading your stuff online, and we kind of have a connection because we're both East Coasters. I'm in
Mhm.
Delaware, and you were from Maryland. You don't live there now.
No, I'm in Colorado now, but my sister is in Ocean Pines, Maryland. So I
Nice,
actually, my Delaware connection is when it was about 12 years ago. I went back to work at the Rehoboth Beach Film Festival and
nice.
ended up working for Dogfish Head as well,
Oh
doing
wow,
bartending and serving there on the weekends.
oh
And I stayed
wow.
with my sister. So I would make the commute from like Ocean City area to Rehoboth
Now, Dogfish Head,
daily.
isn't that where Dave Grohl sometimes hangs out? Dave Grohl from
Yeah,
Foo Fighters. Did you ever run
yeah.
into him while you were there? Or?
No, and in fact, I had just left when Robert Plant came
Robert
to
Plant was
visit. Yeah,
there?
because his son is a brewer.
Get out of
So
here.
I didn't work at the brewery. I worked at Dogfish Eats, and at the time the distillery was in the restaurant, but it was like right on Rehoboth Avenue, going up to the
Oh,
boardwalk.
okay. Oh,
Yeah,
nice. Oh, that's so
yeah,
awesome. And for
yeah.
those listening and watching, and we have this on YouTube and then a whole bunch of fun places like Spotify, Apple Music. We're not going to spend the whole show talking about Delaware
No,
and stuff like that, although that would be a fun one. We're
totally.
going to talk about one of our favorite things ever. I've been a big fan of it for, well, since it came out. And I know Sarah's been a long time fan. It's Twin Peaks. We're going to get into the original series, the movie Fire Walk with Me, and The Return, which came out in 2017. So, am I correct to assume you've been a fan for a long time, Sarah?
Yes, it was. I'll give you a brief rundown of my intro to Twin Peaks. Was when I was growing up, like every time my dad let me watch something with him,
Hmm.
it felt like a rite of passage for me. Um, and he rented or Twin Peaks from Blockbuster, I believe,
Oh, wow.
and invited me to watch it with him. And I fell in love with the show immediately. My sister, who's older than I am, also like loved the show, got me into watching it. So yeah, my dad and I would watch it, and he would dance around the living room like Leland Palmer.
Oh, really? That's really fun.
Yeah, he had
Was it Mersey Dotes and Dozy Don'ts, something like
yes,
that?
it was so creepy. So when I was in, I can't even remember how old I was, but I was going to a performing arts camp in upstate New York, and an older boy from my area was also going for, it was like a 2 week thing. And so my dad actually volunteered to drive us up because there wasn't, a bus coming from our area. And so the guy comes over. I'm getting to the point where I'm excited about boys. His name was Marshall. And I was like, oh, he's so cute. So as soon as he walked in, my dad started doing the dance. And then he said, I don't know if Sarah's told you, but her dad's a little weird. And it was a painful 9 to 10 hour drive after that, mostly
Oh,
in
that's
silence.
great. So you were into it then, like you said, at that young age. That's so cool.
Mhm.
You watched the videos from Blockbuster. Now
Yeah.
I'm a little bit older than you. I don't know your age, and you don't know mine. We'll keep it that way, and we're going to let
Yes,
the audience not know either. But
that's
I
right.
watched it during the original run, and the series had started. Actually, the anniversary of it's coming up. The premiere date was April 8th, 1990, on ABC TV. I didn't watch it probably in the first several weeks, but there was so much buzz around it then. Everybody kept talking about it. And the first season was very short. The first season, I believe, was only 8 episodes for the first season. I think I watched
Yeah.
it when they reran it that summer. And then I became like a big nerd with it all. I got
Uh-huh.
so into it. I found out there was a Twin Peaks newsletter that was designed as if it were a newspaper from the town of Twin Peaks. I subscribed to that. I got that all the time and was so into it. I love the first season, and then I watched it religiously every. I forget what night of the week it was on. I think at one point it was a weeknight, but then it ended up on Saturday nights. And I was there. I pretty much revolved my life around it. I didn't make any other plans for those nights. I remember one of my
Yeah.
coworkers at the time really kind of really getting on me about it. He's like, you're not going to go out with your friends on Saturday night because you want to watch Twin Peaks?" I'm like, "Yes, that's absolutely right.
Yeah,
I am staying
exactly.
home to watch Twin Peaks, and I love
You
it.
made
I
the
still
wiser
love it."
choice.
Go ahead.
You made the wiser choice.
I did. I really, really did. Because are they able to talk on a podcast about it 30 years later, like we're doing right now? No.
Right.
And
Exactly.
I'm still a fan. I've got my little Dale Cooper Funko Pop. He's got his little cup of
Yes.
coffee there. My wife Lisa got that for me a few years back.
That's awesome.
I've also got the audio listeners can't see this obviously, but I have a T-shirt on that I got during the time of the return. It says WWTGDD, and it's what would the good Dale do? Because if you watch the return, you knew there was more than one version of Cooper in the return. But we'll get to that when we get to the return. So yeah, I just want to make it very clear I'm a big nerd. Regular watchers of the show will know I'm a nerd, but I'm totally nerding out now talking to Sarah about Twin Peaks. So,
Yeah.
with the original series, did you have? Let's talk about some favorite characters.
Yeah.
You go
I
ahead.
think in the original series, I mean, I really, I was getting to the point where I was getting boy crazy. So I
I know
gravitated
there was
toward
Mark.
James. Yeah. James's personality with Bobby's looks, to
Mm.
me, that,
Sarah, you just
but
froze.
I,
Uh,
but in terms of going deeper with more powerful characters.
well, I'm sorry. Hold on one second. What's funny is
Okay.
I said your name, and I somehow activated Siri instead of Sarah.
Nice.
So you be quiet. And you did cut out for a second. You said you liked a combination of what would you say? Bobby's looks and James's
With James'
personality.
personality, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that was the kind of, in terms of surface level characters, who I felt most gravitated toward. And then I loved Audrey.
Oh yeah.
Um, and I loved how, even though she was dealing with so much, she kind of came out of it unscathed. I didn't particularly care for her in the return, but we
Mm-hmm.
can talk about that later.
Oh yeah. That's
um,
boy. That was interesting.
and then I just remember feeling so cool. My older sister was very into musical theater growing up. Got me turned on to musicals as a kid, and West Side Story was her favorite. And we have not one but two leads from West Side Story and Twin Peaks.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So I loved Dr. Jacoby, Russ Tamblyn, Riff,
Oh yeah, he
and
was.
then Benjamin Horn was Richard Breimer, who played Tony.
Yeah,
So we
exactly.
had
I didn't
organic.
realize that for the longest time. I'm like, this guy looks familiar. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's Tony, because I had seen
Yeah.
like a lot of people back then. I had watched West Side Story repeatedly on like back on the old UHF channels, and it was great to see him again. And I love his character. I love Benjamin Horn. He's
I do as
really
well.
he's really quite cool, and I wish he had been used a little bit more, maybe a little bit better in the return. But again,
I agree.
we'll get back to the return. And
And Pete, I loved Pete.
oh, Pete's fantastic. I love
Yeah.
Pete Martell, who was married to Catherine. Interesting relationship there.
Mhm.
Pete's one of the first characters we met in the first episode because Pete was the one that discovered Laura Palmer's body,
Right.
and I think it was like, "She's dead, Harry." He kept saying over and over
Yeah.
again. And Pete was a wonderful character.
And
I'm trying to remember
Harry was
who.
great.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Sarah.
Harry was great. Norma's great.
Yeah, and then of course Norma, you had the relationship with well, a longtime love was Big Ed Hurley, who
Yep.
you mentioned James earlier, and he was James's uncle in the
Right.
show, and I like Big Ed. Big Ed's an interesting character.
Yeah.
Another character I wish we had seen more of in the return, but there.
Yeah, but I will say, what I appreciated about the return is that he had, like, he he got the golden ending in a lot of
Yes,
ways
he
that
did.
we hoped for in the original.
Exactly, exactly. So I love those characters. And you had mentioned Bobby. Bobby, when I remember when it first aired, Bobby was one of those ones that towards the beginning you just wanted to hate the guy because he was,
Mhm.
he was very much this young, cocky guy who he was having affairs. He was into illegal things. And I just grew to love the guy, and I was so happy to see him in the return as well. His character went through quite a transformation. But
Agreed. Yeah.
Bobby was involved with Laura Palmer, and for those who don't know, I mean, the series pretty much revolved around the murder of Laura Palmer, and well, at least the first season did, first season
Mhm.
and a half, and she was played by Cheryl Lee. Is that right? I
Yeah.
think, yeah,
Yep.
Cheryl Lee. And she also played another role. She played Laura's cousin, Maddie Ferguson. I liked her
Yeah.
quite a bit as Maddie too. Her look-alike cousin. It was almost like a Patty Duke thing, where you had an identical cousin.
Yeah. Yeah. What I love though is even as we move on from Laura's story, it's still it's still so much about her
Yeah,
and Cooper's connection with her, whether you want to say that's, you know, obviously like on the surface level, he has quite a connection to her because he was investigating her murder, but the connection began before that, as you learn in Fire Walk with Me.
yeah,
And and she plays such a pivotal role in the return as well. Um, so I
yeah.
thought
She
that was really
does.
neat.
And you're right. Through the very beginning of the show, even into the second season, when the murder had been solved, that storyline of she's still there. No matter. I
Mhm.
think if this was a real town, she would probably still be there in 2024. You just this
Totally.
powerful character who affected so many other people's lives and the lives of this whole community, and
Mhm.
FBI agents and so many others. And it was interesting because I know a lot of people felt that the series went downhill after her storyline was resolved. A lot of people too thought that that was stretched out a little longer than they thought maybe it should have been. I was fine with it lasting as long as it did. One of my favorite episodes is, I can't remember what episode number it was in the second season, but where everything was resolved with Laura's
Mhm.
murder. And we're doing this now in 2024, which is long, long after when the series ended. So we're going to have spoilers here, folks. So if you want to watch Twin Peaks, maybe turn this off now, go watch this. I'm going to keep this up on YouTube for as long as I'm alive. So you can come back to this. But in that episode I'm referring to, you had the apprehension of her father, Leland Palmer, who was, I guess, he was inhabited by this spirit Bob, who was the one that turned him into a killer. And not only did he kill Laura, he ended up killing Maddie Ferguson and I believe some others. And to me, that was one of my favorite episodes ever. The way that that was set up, and also including the episode that preceded it, because you had a character who some referred to as the Giant, and then later he was called the Fireman, who had appeared at the what's the club they all go to?
The Bang Bang?
Yes, thank you. The Bang,
Yeah.
well, yeah, because they were Coop was there and so many others were there, and then you see him on stage appearing to Cooper, saying it is happening again, and that is while Bob/Leland was killing Maddie, and then it all culminated in the next episode with the apprehension of Leland, and to me, those are some of my favorite episodes. I thought they were so well done.
Yeah, and we should talk a little bit too about how, I mean, I think it was such like the original series only aired for 2 seasons
Yeah, that's it.
and has had such an impact on pop culture since. And I think like it was so groundbreaking. I think that part of the reason people had such an issue with the drawn out case of Laura Palmer was because there was no prestige drama on television yet. It was
Yeah,
episodic, so like they were used to a 1 to 2 parter for to wrap up a mystery.
right.
Um, and I think it set the ground for as like prestige drama. I mean, even for shows like Lost and Game of Thrones and Dexter, I think that they all of those shows, regardless of genre, owe a huge amount of debt to Twin Peaks. Um, and
I
the
agree
fact that
with you.
the fact that it aired on ABC as well was like this was before streaming, when cable was mostly you turned on cable to watch MTV, maybe CNN.
Yeah,
And
yeah, that's true. And
Yeah.
there wasn't much in terms of networks like HBO back then even having original series at that
Right.
point. Because you figure if HBO and some of those others had been around back in 1989, I think that would have
Oh,
been the go to for Twin Peaks back then.
oh, yeah.
Because
And I
Lynch
think
could have
that,
done it with no restrictions, and
yep. I think it could have easily seen like multiple seasons
I
as a
agree.
result.
I agree, and you're so right in that there was really nothing else like it in terms of dramas on television back then. The closest you had, maybe, and I suppose there are some similarities, are your nighttime soaps. You know, because you
Hmm.
had with the continuing storylines,
Yeah.
and in some ways there was some soap opera
Oh,
type
yeah.
things in here. Quite a few things. You had a lot of interesting
Josie.
romantic pairings and
Oh, yeah.
affairs, and
Josie and Harry is what I always think of. Sheriff Harry S. Truman, played by Michael Ontkean.
who was
Um,
fantastic. I
he
loved
was
Harry.
amazing. Yeah, he was one of my favorites too.
Me too.
But it was so over the top, histrionic, and then they would play that like heavy score behind them.
Oh, I loved, and the
Um,
music was so good
yeah.
in the series.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think? So when you first started watching, because I know that I got excited about watching it even before I had seen it,
Mm-hmm.
partially because of my dad and my sister, but also because for me, um, I had I was turned on to like Stephen King novels at far too early an age, which I find is a common thread with Stephen King readers.
Yeah, I
Like
think it
read
is.
I read Pet Cemetery and The Stand in sixth grade, and
Wow.
yeah, and so I think for me there was something so compelling about like mystery with supernatural elements,
Hmm.
especially, and the way that villains and heroes can be everyday people in such extremes. And I like, so it just always intrigued me. But what do you think what was it for you that like pulled you into the show initially?
I think it's very similar to what you just described. I've always had a fascination with your sort of supernatural things. I'm not an overly religious person, but I do believe in like there being, I don't know, interesting things out there that we don't quite understand, that we don't know about. I know there's a famous line that I remember Coop repeating at one point, saying, I think it might be a Shakespeare line. There's more in heaven and earth, more than heaven. Do you know what it? I can't remember it exactly. Than we
Yeah,
understand.
I don't know verbatim, but you're
I'm
like,
close
yes,
there, I think.
yeah,
I,
that's
I always had that thinking too. Go ahead. Sorry.
yeah. Well, and I think that's the thing too. Like, I am a person of faith. However, I think what's universal is regardless of your belief system, there is a distinct kind of ongoing battle of good versus evil. You
Yes.
know, and we see it in everyday life, we see it in politics, we see
Yeah.
it in war and genocide. And um, yeah, so I think that like too is so neat how hardcore they explore that.
Yeah. They do, and
Um,
it was just brilliant. There was nothing like it back then. I don't think there's really been much like it since then.
mm-mm.
And of course, it was the creation of David Lynch and Mark Frost. They had done this together, and Lynch did a lot of he did a lot of the writing, but he directed several of the episodes. Mark Frost, I believe, wrote or co-wrote the majority of them, and just so brilliant. And we mentioned, of course, the murder of Laura Palmer, but there were so many other things going on, like you said, like the story with Harry and Josie. And now, when I was first watched it, that was one of the things that I was maybe least interested. There were certain storylines that I liked less than some others. But then my viewpoint has changed on them over the years too. I think when they originally aired and I watched them, I'm like, okay, this is nice. You know, I like Harry. Josie's pretty. I like her. I'll sit through this, but I want to get to the stuff where they're investigating the murder. But now, if I rewatch them now, which I've done multiple times, you know, I have a greater appreciation for all the storylines. Like I mentioned, Catherine Martell, who was Pete's wife. She was having an affair with Benjamin Horne, and she was involved with all kinds of crazy things with her business and with her late husband. No, wait, not her brother.
And,
Her brother. Yeah.
yeah, and played by, we should give a shout out to Piper Laurie for
Oh
that as
yeah.
well, played by the late great Piper Laurie, who just passed last year.
Yeah, she was fantastic in the role. And
Yeah.
that, again, that's something maybe I didn't appreciate as much back then when I watched it in my 20s. But as I watched it later, I was like, wow, she was wonderful. And I was really sad
Yeah.
when she passed last year.
Yeah. And you know that Peggy Lipton as well, who played Norma.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we've
She also
lost a lot of cast members in the last
Oh
several
yeah.
years. And what's really interesting and quite sad is that we lost a few, like at the time of the return, like right around when it aired. For example, Miguel
Hmm.
Ferrer had played
Hmm.
FBI agent Albert Rosenfeld, and he
Yeah.
passed, I believe, right before he had filmed the episodes, and I think it was just about to air, and he
I
passed
think you're
away.
right.
Yeah, and then
Yeah, there were. I think there were actually a few. I can't
yeah,
remember like that, or a few who appeared in the return and then passed away that same year, which was crazy.
yeah, it was crazy. I know
I know.
the actress who played the log lady was one of them. I think it was
Yes.
Catherine Coulson, I
Kath-
believe.
yes, Catherine Coulson. She's
Yeah.
awesome too.
Oh, so awesome, and it was nice to
How-
see her in there. And you could tell she was actually, I guess, suffering from cancer when she filmed her episodes for
yeah.
The Return. And it was nice to have her in there though. And I think another one was actually he passed I think 2 weeks after the final episode of The Return was Harry Dean Stanton, who
Yes.
had a
Who's
small role in it.
amazing.
Yeah,
Well, he plays he actually started that role in Fire Walk with Me.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah. So he's the Carl Rod, who's the manager of the trailer park where lots of stuff goes down.
Yeah.
I'll
Well, that's
refrain from cursing, but um, and I think I'm sure that most people who will tune in are probably fans of Twin Peaks,
hmm
or they would probably not choose to listen, except for our enlightening and engaging personalities. They just feel so compelled. But I also think we need to talk about how did you feel about David Lynch's role on the show?
I love David Lynch's role on the
Me
show.
too.
Yeah, FBI Bureau, I think that's the proper title.
Deputy,
FBI
deputy,
Bureau Deputy Bureau Chief
yeah,
Gordon
he said
Cole.
Gordon Cole. It makes me laugh every time, and like he just sets the tone so hardcore for the entirety of everything.
That yeah, he's great. And for those who don't know, and again, you probably do know if you're listening to this or watching it, but one of the most entertaining things about Gordon is he doesn't have the best hearing in the world. He wears a hearing
Yes,
aid, but he speaks very loud, and he has people repeat things constantly. And as I get older, I'm having people repeat things as well. But such a great character, so matter of fact, and so such an FBI guy, and his and Cooper and Albert's relationships I love. And then we
yeah.
also had what was the name? David Duchovny. One of his first roles was in the original
Oh
Twin Peaks.
yeah, I
Yeah,
forgot
and
about that.
yeah, and gosh, I can't remember the character's name now, but he was one of the first trans characters probably
Yeah.
on TV or
Oh
cross. I guess
yes,
back then
he
he was like
totally
a
was.
cross dresser. Dennis, I think it was. Dennis
Yeah,
and Denise.
Dennis Neese. Yep,
Yeah,
you're correct.
and all their relationships I loved. I loved the FBI characters in the original, but yeah, Gordon Cole, such a great character in the original, and I was very happy to see him play a prominent role in the return as well.
Yeah, he continues the role throughout all three,
Yeah,
and I love how he shouts, and he's
me
got
too.
such a Midwestern sensibility as Lynch himself does.
Yeah,
And I think that like I love that too because his right away as soon as he says like his first line in each of the series, you know that there will be some levity and some humor, albeit mostly dark or bizarre, but like there's stuff in there that he's just such an incredible, like as a film student, like I was so geeked out by David Lynch anyway.
yeah,
Um,
such an
he's just
amazing
incredible.
talent.
Yeah.
I wish he did a little bit more. I don't know how old he is. I know he's into his 70s now, and
I think
he's
he's 77.
oh, okay. Working, less frequently, but I know there's always rumors about whether or not he would do more Twin Peaks, and if that happens, I will be thrilled with it. If not, I'm not going to be surprised. I mean, I was surprised when The Return came around. I don't think anyone was expecting that would ever happen.
Yeah.
but I loved Gordon. And oh boy, there's just so much we could talk about the original series. And as you can see and hear, folks, we are going to be hopping around back and forth between the different things because they're all so related. So, like I said, the original Twin Peaks ran from, it was, like Sarah said, it was just 2 seasons. The first one was 8 episodes. The second one was 22 episodes. That ended in June of 1991. And then it was quite a while. I guess it was just
No,
about a year later,
yeah,
92, that
yeah. Fire Walk
Fire
with Me
Walk with
came
Me
out
came out.
too.
Now you know more about Fire Walk with Me. It seems like you've seen it more than I have. I saw
Yeah,
it. I was very excited when I heard there was a movie version of Twin Peaks coming out, and I was there on the opening day. I think I took the day off from work and I went to the first showing on a Friday afternoon. And while I liked it, I don't know. I don't want to say I was disappointed in it, but I don't know. Maybe it was missing some elements that I had loved from the original series. But I mean, it was very dark for sure, and it's we spoke about this before the show. It was very heart wrenching too. Some of the things that happened. It was very
yeah.
intense.
I like so I as I rewatched it last night, and if when I first saw it, it was so I'm hooked on the show now. My sister's hooked on the show now. It's a cool bonding thing. Like we have a decade between us, so like she's always been the cool big sister slash aunt role, kind of.
Oh,
And
okay, cool.
um, but so she had read and then gave me uh, Jennifer Lynch, who directed, I believe she directed Fire Walk with Me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
You're
I
right.
believe so. Um, but she wrote an accompanying book called The Secret Diary of Laura Palmer.
I remember that. I never got that, but I remember it became a bestseller, I believe.
Yeah. So, and I think that was some of like the first, again, like things that we've seen, that are so commonplace now is like those tie-ins with like check out this newsletter and this book. And so I remember reading that and it was just so creepy. And so with Fire Walk with Me, I think what's great about it is a pretty unflinching look at sexual abuse and
Hmm.
how, sorry, trigger warning guys, but how it really impacts the victims and different ways that those raw festering wounds come out. So that's what it's really about. That it's about kind of the precursor. It's a prequel to the original series.
Yes.
So it's mostly about Laura Palmer's journey into kind of acknowledging the fact that she's been sexually molested by Bob since she was 12, and then understanding that it's actually her father who's been doing this. And so, and what I think is great about the way that Lynch writes and sets up everything for all three is that even though it's very heavy symbolism and a lot of supernatural elements, he leaves it up to the viewer in terms of interpretation. He
Yes.
never says concretely, like, yeah, you can accept this and accept that Bob is this demon, but who is living inside of Leland Palmer. But also, Bob could be the true nature of Leland Palmer that he's been able to mask and keep separate, and now it's combined. And then Laura's acting out and doing like she was extremely promiscuous,
Hmm.
very into drugs, and really just trying to numb herself to what was going on at home. There's a point in the film where she realizes that Bob is now inside of her as well,
Hmm.
so that she would probably go on to do some pretty terrible things and that she's not winning that good versus evil battle. So that's the heavy stuff in it. The cool stuff is you do learn a lot about how everything transpired before Laura's murder. Um, on a side trivia fact, Donna, who's her best friend on the show, and is in Fire Walk with Me as well, but she's not played by Lara Flynn Boyle. She's played by
Right.
Moira Kelly.
Hmm.
Um, the rumors were that Laura Flynn Boyle had some not great behavior on set and did not get along very well with
I've
Frost
heard
or
that as
Lynch.
well.
But so that was very interesting, and but I think in a kind of a cool way, there are some healing elements to Fire Walk with Me, because it really is it is such an unflinching look at what that situation does to its victims,
Yes.
and the ripple effect of that. And then as an aside too, I'll say that although Bob is really just a guy with a glorious mullet and a jean jacket, he still scares the crap out of me. I mean, he's such a monster personified.
Yeah.
Um,
He was.
so
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
yeah. No, I was just gonna say, so I think that like the thing that I would agree with you on in terms of the elements it's missing is there's not any levity,
Yeah.
you know, and it really gets into the supernatural themes even more so than the original. But you start to see like in Fire Walk with Me, Heather Graham is in it as Annie, who's
Oh
a
yeah, that's
big part of
right.
the second season. And she appears to Laura in her dream and tells her that the good Cooper is stuck in the Black Lodge,
Oh, that's right. That's right.
but tells her not to wear the ring or she'll be murdered. Um, and I think that, so I think it like adds to the good aspects of the return as well. It's like almost a precursor to that, because Cooper, like all of the main protagonists in the show are battling between the Black Lodge and the White Lodge,
Hmm.
and the dualistic nature of self. And Cooper is the only like lead who comes out on top of that. Like you see his bad side, you see his dark self, but he manages to conquer that ultimately, and he's never, you see other characters like Sarah Palmer,
Hmm. Oh, poor Sarah Palmer.
Laura's, oh my gosh, she's a
Uh,
disaster. But I think like she just let the darkness of other people consume her and never allowed herself to kind of become redeemed, whether she couldn't because of supernatural stuff, or if you look at it as like a real world thing, like she just couldn't deal with it. So
right.
she was ruined as a human.
Yeah,
But
and
Cooper always fights the fight with a
yeah,
good cup of
and Cooper's such an amazing character. And yeah, it's funny when not funny, but when I first saw the movie, I think I was a little disappointed when the movie came out because of it being a prequel. Because
coffee.
for those who know the series very well, the way that the second season ended, there were a lot of questions hanging about different things. You didn't know the fate of Dale Cooper. It ended in a very interesting way where basically we ended up seeing his doppelganger at the end of it with a famous, how's Annie? How's Annie?
Yeah.
How's Annie thing, which I cannot do anywhere near as demented as he did.
It
Um,
still gave me goosebumps, so
but that was such a great ending. And there were other things that were hanging too. You had like a bomb go off, I believe, in a bank, and there were all kinds of these things that were hanging. And I would have liked to have seen those resolved back then. That then get a prequel. At least that was my primary thinking back then.
yeah,
But having said that, in the prequel, you got to learn so much more about. I believe it was the last week or so of Laura's life, wasn't it?
yeah.
Primarily, yeah.
The
And
last one, I think. And
oh, okay.
you see Leland Palmer also kills Ronette Plansky,
Oh,
and
yeah,
then Teresa Banks. It all starts with Teresa Banks.
that's right.
Uh, Chris Isaac plays a FBI agent, Chet
Chester
Desmond, I think.
Drummond, something like that.
No, it's
Chet
Chet.
Drummond.
I
Yeah.
think it's Chet Desmond.
Oh, okay. That's
Um,
it. I'm sorry. Yeah.
but he disappears like out
Yeah.
of thin air, and it's never answered. We never find out in the return what happened to him either.
Yeah. One tie-in I remember being in there was well, maybe not a tie-in, but Kiefer Sutherland had a role in that too.
Yeah, he was
And
another FBI.
yeah, and I know it's his name was Sam, and at some point, I think it was in the original series, Coop mentioned Sam in relation to Albert because I guess they did the same kind of job.
Oh,
So I mean, that happened before Fire Walk with Me
um,
was made, but
that's
so
awesome though.
yeah, that is pretty. I just found that out recently when I was rewatching it, and I'm just like, oh, okay. I think it was just like a quick throwaway line. Oh, you better not
Yeah.
let Sam know about that, or something like that. But Kiefer's, you had like these prominent actors and celebrities like Chris Isaac in there, and he was good in his. And David Bowie, of course, was in.
Yep. Oh, David Bowie was amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, he was. He was.
And they
I
they
heard that.
allude to his
I'm sorry.
character
Go ahead,
too.
Sarah.
I was just gonna say they allude to his character in The Return.
Yeah,
Um,
as
Warren
being.
Jeffries, I believe,
Yeah,
was his
and he was
name.
quite different in the second one.
Yes.
Well, he's not quite a person anymore. Was he a tea kettle, or he turned into a tea kettle, or something like that at the end?
Yeah, and didn't they have like his brain? It's
Yeah,
there is some absurdist elements for sure with
for
it.
sure, for sure. I understand that Bowie was approached to be in the return, but at that point his health was already very bad, and
Oh, really?
yeah, he couldn't do it. I think this was he passed I think in early 2016. The show came out in
No.
2017. Yeah,
He 2016 is when Bowie passed?
I believe
Man,
so.
time flies.
I
I thought it
know, I
was
know. I remember
later
that
than
being an especially bad year because you had several celebrities die that year. Musicians, I think Prince
that.
died the same year, George Michael, and it was a year from hell for music fans.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, but so yeah, Bowie couldn't be involved. He did say that his likeness could be used for the return, and but
That's right.
he didn't like the accent that he did in Fire Walk with Me, so he asked specifically for some other actor to dub his voice. So I don't know, just weird trivia stuff that I geek out on
Yeah,
Wikipedia and
no,
other
that's so
places.
cool.
But so yeah, I want to rewatch Fire Walk with Me soon because, like you said, it gets into finding out more why Laura Palmer was the way she was. A lot of times when you watch the original series, she was presented as, just this wild, out of control teenager, but there were really dark and horrible reasons for that.
Mhm, mhm.
She was just,
That's I don't wanna forget this, so I'm gonna read it now because I feel
sure.
like it's appropriate. But I was reading, an interview. It was a June 2018 interview in The Guardian, with Rory Carroll. It was a David Lynch interview.
Mhm.
So if anyone wants to check it out, it's David Lynch, "You Gotta Be Selfish, It's a Terrible Thing," is the headline.
Oh,
But it's talking about how because, some Lynch films, you feel like you can at least make your own interpretation and feel comfortable with it. Some, like Lost Highway, I remember ending and being I was like, "What?"
yeah.
I have no idea. But it's so I think what's interesting with him is even though it's so symbolic, it's not heavy-handed symbolism, and it's very much like, "This is my world, interpret it as you want." So anyway, he says in this interview, "I don't ever explain it because it's not a word thing. It would reduce it, it would make it smaller to over explain." And I
Wow.
love that
Yeah, I
because I
do
think
too.
I think that's what sets him apart as there's so many people who try to copy his because it's such a like unique vision
Hmm.
of film and
Absolutely.
storytelling. And I think that so many people try to copy that and fail because they are like they're not presenting the world in their head. They're presenting what they think will sell or look cool or be considered Lynchian. And so I think that's so awesome that he's like, I respect my viewers enough to leave it up to you. I don't have to over explain it.
Yeah, and I love that too. Now, there's part of that I don't know that I don't love though,
Yeah.
but I want to get back to that when we get into the return, which we're going to do in just a
Cool.
minute. But yeah, no, for the most part though, I love that too. And by the way, well, I'm going to walk over here to my bookcase for a second because I want to talk about a
Okay.
book by David Lynch. So,
Okay, great.
you're going to be up on camera. I'm walking backwards.
Okay. Looking forward to this book, guys. Hope you're enjoying listening. We
So,
could probably do episodes of Twin Peaks.
I am back, and this is a book. It's called "It's Catching the Big Fish" by David Lynch, and it's all about well, meditation, conscious, and creativity. So, if you are a creative person, I highly recommend this short book to you. I have a special 10th anniversary edition that actually has interviews with Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr in there.
Oh,
But if you want
cool.
to learn more about David Lynch as a creator and an artist, I highly recommend this book.
That's so cool.
Yeah, yeah, I think you'd like it, Sarah. I really do. And well, let's we talked so much about the return. We keep alluding to it. So why don't we get into that a little bit? This came out in 2017, and there was a famous scene in the original Twin Peaks series where you see Agent Dale Cooper at the is it the Black Lodge or the White Lodge? I guess it's the White Lodge with when he's with Laura Palmer. I can't remember. I get
Oh,
my
yeah,
lodges
no,
mixed up.
I think that was the White Lodge, but I'm
Yeah.
not positive.
And well, yeah, folks, if you're this far, you're a fan of Twin Peaks and you've seen this or at least know a lot about it. So I'm not going to go into explaining the different lodges because it's really bizarre. But you see Laura Palmer speaking to him and saying, I'll see you again in 25 years. And then the show ended, and then I think it was actually ended up being 26 years later that they came up with the new series, The Return. And
I love that so much. It's such a good tie-in. I mean, that's such great storytelling. Like,
isn't it? I
and
mean,
to have viewers like you catch that and have such a big payoff, and oh, that makes me happy. Anyway,
it just
makes me
blew my
happy.
mind. I know when it started up and then you see them together again and you see that flashback from the original series, I'll see you in 25 years. And Coop has been missing from our planet because he's been in this mystical place for all these years. And this series, a lot of people call it Twin Peaks season 3, but it was presented as Twin Peaks: The Return. And David Lynch, while he directed some of the episodes of the original series, he actually directed every episode of this one, and he wrote or co-wrote them with Mark Frost. And it's wild. It's really wild. It ran on Showtime, like I said, back in 2017, and in some ways, I don't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing in terms of viewership. I mean, it got a big viewership from a lot of people signed up for Showtime just to watch it. I know that's what I did, and then
Yeah.
it lasted.
It's what I do
Originally, I think
every
it was.
year now with
What's that, Sarah?
I was gonna say, just because this show, I think, also owes quite a bit to Twin Peaks. It's what I do now with Yellow Jackets. Is
Oh,
I wait till it's like about halfway through the season, and then
mhm.
I hook up with Showtime for the trial bit, like binge it, cancel.
It's funny. Lisa's my wife, folks. That's we were talking about watching that. We keep seeing previews for Yellow Jackets. I don't know much
Oh,
about it, but
you
it
would
looks wild.
love it. You would
Awesome.
love it. I've written extensively about it on different
That's right.
platforms,
I saw
and
you write
like
about it.
you would love it. I
And I
think
know
you
it's
should
got
definitely,
it's got
and I
some
think
cast
Lisa
members.
would love
Isn't
it too.
Juliette Lewis in that? And
Yes.
Christina, I always say her name, Ricci or Richie
Yeah,
or
Christina Ricci, they're all it's phenomenal cast. It's very Twin Peaksian.
okay,
Um, the first season especially, the second season lost it a little bit for me, but yeah, you and Lisa need to watch Yellow Jackets.
okay. We're gonna start that
100%.
up soon then. But yeah. So originally the return I think was going to be 8 or 9 episodes, but then Lynch shot so much material they just decided to have an 18 episode season, which was
Was that more? Does that exceed the original run's
it
amount of
does by
episodes?
a little. It's close. Well, the first season of Twin Peaks was 8 episodes, and so glad I printed this all out from Wikipedia earlier.
I know.
The second season was 22, so it was close. And in some ways,
Wow.
though, you figure I think for the showtime they were all about an hour long. You figure when the show
Mhm.
ran on ABC, it was probably closer to 45 or 50 minutes per episode. So
Yeah.
we got a lot of material there, and it's quite different because a great deal of it, probably the majority of it, does not take place in Twin Peaks. It deals with Coop, well, getting out of the lodge and then being this other version of himself, another doppelganger named Dougie.
Dougie, that's right.
Dougie,
Dougie.
who's I think a insurance salesman
Yes.
in Nevada, I think.
In Vegas,
Yeah,
yeah.
in Vegas. That's right. And Dougie's wife, she's fantastic. It is Naomi Watts, who had worked with David
Yep.
Lynch previously in I forget which movie.
Mulholland Drive she was
Mulholland
in,
Drive. Yes, thank you.
and I believe she did another project with Lynch too, but
I think you're
I couldn't
right.
tell you.
But
And
she's Janie E, and she's great in her role. But yeah, it's interesting because you've got Kyle MacLachlan, of course, plays Dale Cooper. Dale Cooper, ladies and gentlemen, and in this one, he's multiple versions of it. He's Dale Cooper. He's the evil doppelganger who we referred to earlier as being at the very tail end of the original series. And then I guess it's those three. Then at some
Dougie,
point,
yeah.
yeah, Dougie, and then at some point, actually, Cooper transforms into Richard. But that's all kind of wild and not one of my favorite parts of it. But
No.
it's interesting, and like I said, only a small part of it takes place in Twin Peaks. One thing that is significantly different about this is that Harry S. Truman is not in that modern day version of Twin Peaks. They
He had
allude to
retired
his
from acting at that point.
Yeah, he had retired from
That's why.
acting. I think he was initially going to do it. He had told David Lynch, Michael Ontkean was going to do it, but then he said, nah, that's it, I'm retired. And so what's interesting is he was replaced. His character was replaced by Frank Truman, who was Harry's brother. And I just learned this recently is that he was played by Robert. Oh gosh, I'm drawing a blank on his name now. But Robert Forster, I think it is.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, and originally he was supposed to be Harry in the original Twin Peaks. He was cast as Harry, but there was some sort of scheduling conflict, so he
Oh,
couldn't
that's
do it. And
cool. I
that's
did
where
not know
Michael
that.
Ontkean came in. And I don't know if I'm
That's a
saying
fun
Ontkean's name right, but I think I'm close.
trivia. That's as an aside too. Michael Onkian,
Yeah, I don't
Kian,
know. Ontkean?
uh, Michael O.
Michael, oh, yes.
Sorry, Michael, if you're listening.
And
But
gosh, I hope you are.
he right his last role was in Alexander Payne's The Descendants, which is probably my favorite Alexander Payne film.
Oh, I've never seen that.
Phenomenal. George Clooney,
Oh,
Matthew Lillard, who's also in The Return,
yes, that's
who
right.
I've met in person as like a little humble brag. He's such a great, amazing human being. I've met him
Oh, very
several
cool.
times actually. Yeah.
Very, very cool. And yeah, he has a small role in The Return, but it's a pretty important role
Yeah.
in it. It's so interesting, folks. If you haven't seen it, I would recommend watching the original series, of course, and watching Fire Walk with Me. But I've been rewatching some of The Return as to get ready for this episode today, and I had only seen it the first time when it first aired. I hadn't watched it since then, which again is like 7 years ago now. But I mean, I've been enjoying it quite a bit, and it's wild. Some episodes are just so far out there where you're dealing with the whole supernatural aspect of
Yeah.
it. There's an awful lot of that. Like I said, not as much happens in Twin Peaks, but you do see some characters return. You still got Bobby there. Bobby's a police officer now. He works for the Twin Peaks
Yeah.
Sheriff's
He's a
Department, which
deputy.
blew my mind.
Shelley, Norma, Ed are all back.
Yeah,
Audrey,
James.
kind of.
Which one
James,
did you say?
Audrey.
Oh, yes, yes, kind of. Yeah.
Yeah, kind of. I think for me, and it's been a bit for me. I binged it last year again.
Hmm.
So I'd seen it, same thing. I had watched it right when it came out, which I'm pretty sure was yesterday, not 7 years
I
ago.
know. How did that happen?
So crazy. Um, but and then I re-binged it last year, and I think like my biggest contention with it was just the fact that I mean, not to take away from Kyle MacLachlan is a wonderful actor. I mean, I think he's very underrated. He's such a
Hmm.
wonderful actor. Um, and I've heard he's a really great person too, which makes it even better. But
Yeah. I follow
he
him online. He seems like a lot of fun.
yeah, and so I just think that good Dale Cooper is a character that I love so much and I'm so invested in that it
Hmm.
made me sad to I mean, Dougie was just, very imbecilic
Yes.
character who didn't and it was he didn't it was Coop. It wasn't Dougie. It was Dougie had the insurance salesman was gone and he was in his body or Coop's body was back and he was his doppelganger. And so he's been gone for so long that he doesn't know how to operate or speak or move
Yeah,
his
he can
body.
barely, like you said, he can barely speak, and he doesn't understand what's
Yeah.
going on around him, and it takes like this
Yeah.
electrical jolt to snap him back to himself. But unfortunately, that doesn't happen until the second to last episode of the season.
Right, and so that bummed me out to
Me too.
for the most part, we saw Dougie and Evil Coop, and we
Mhm.
didn't really get I feel like the good Agent Dale Cooper that we deserved as an audience.
Yes, I totally agree. I thought McLaughlin was great in doing what he did for those other episodes, but and when you finally did see him become Coop again, it was just fantastic. It was one of the best moments
Mhm.
of the whole series. So he's laying in a hospital bed, and he wakes up. He, I guess, been briefly in a coma after the electric. I think, what did he do? He sucks something into an electrical socket because he understood that he needed to snap himself out of being
Yeah,
Dougie. And
right.
it was really an awesome scene, and there's so much involved with that that I can't even begin to explain it.
Yeah.
I think he had
How did
seen.
you how
Pardon
did
me.
you feel about, I don't what was Laura's name in the when
Oh,
he searches down her character? I can't remember her name.
I can't either. I can't either. It's I know he was Richard. Linda, maybe.
No.
No.
It was like a more common younger person name. I think of Linda's as like my mom, whose name is
Ironically,
Linda.
that's my
But
mother-in-law's name. So
yeah, it's my mom's name too. But what I like, I did appreciate. I really loved that whole ending for what like as much as it doesn't end on a positive note.
hmm.
I loved all of that reconnection with Coop and Laura and Laura's doppelganger
Yeah.
still being able to feel the connection between herself and Laura Palmer and then start having Laura's memories and stuff. I thought that was awesome.
It was awesome. It was awesome. It was really wild the way it was all done because you had um, basically Cooper at the end of the series. You had Cooper actually finally returning to Twin Peaks to kind of wrap up this whole storyline involving the evil Cooper and all these other characters that were brought in. There was this young British guy named Freddie who had the power to knock out
Yeah,
the evil
that's so weird.
Cooper. It was really wild, and
That's so weird.
it was really strange. And then I think it's the whole last hour. Like it switches into this other thing where Coop is pretty much able to change history or go into like an alternate universe. I don't honestly I
Mhm.
don't still fully understand it.
No, me either. I'd have to watch it like 4 more times to fully
Yeah.
grasp what I think Lynch is saying there.
Yeah, and this all kind of circles back to what I was saying before when you had shared that wonderful quote from David Lynch about not always giving the answers to things. And one of my beefs with The Return was that it left a lot of things hanging. You had a very
Mhm.
interesting storyline involving uh, Laura's mother, Sarah, where
Mhm.
that was really quite bizarre, where it seemed
Yeah.
she transformed into some sort of monster toward the end of it, and had that left hanging. We mentioned Audrey Horne, and you don't really know what's going on with Audrey throughout this whole
No.
thing too, where she's married to this really interesting little man who
Terrible dude. Yeah.
yeah,
And I
and at
Go
the end of
ahead.
it, you don't know if she's in maybe some sort of mental institution.
Mhm. That's kind of what my guess was
Yeah,
that, like,
yeah,
maybe
mine
that
too.
is okay. 'Cause I that's she was such a character to root for through the series and really, like, I think stayed above the fray where
Hmm.
almost every other character went into an ambiguous, morally gray area,
Yeah,
and so to see her, I just did not care for how they portrayed her in The Return at all,
no,
and I was like, "She deserves a happy ending as much as Big Ed does." Like, come
yes,
on.
exactly. I mean, my gosh, she went through so much, and then it's never fully explained either. Maybe it is, and I forgot about it, and if so, I apologize. But there is a character in it named Richard Horn, who
Yes,
you
yeah,
kind of understand that is her son, and he is probably the illegitimate child of Audrey and the evil Cooper, but they don't
right.
really fully explain all that. And where I was going with all this, and I guess probably kind of badly, I'm stumbling here with my words, is that there's a
Okay.
lot left hanging at the end of The Return. And I
Mhm.
remember at some point David Lynch addressing it and saying, well, in real life, you don't get all the answers to things. And while that's true, I don't know. I kind of would have liked a little bit more answers because I had just invested
Yeah,
18 hours of my life into this series.
right.
Maybe they were hoping there would be another season where some of these things would be resolved,
Yeah.
but I don't know. I
I
would have liked a little bit more.
I agree, and I like, as we talked about before pre-episode, like for me, what was very frustrating was the lore already is legendary. The lore already stands on its own. Why do we have to the return introduces aliens, and
Yeah.
maybe Sarah and Leland as children in the 50s were infected by these aliens who are really
Yes.
Bob and if you remember Mike from the original series who ends up being good,
Yes.
who had the one-armed man as they
One Armed
call
Man.
him,
Yeah.
because Fire Walk with Me was on his other arm. He had to amputate that
Yes.
to become a first force of good because he was Bob's partner in crime. But at any rate, like I just thought that was like adding way too many layers onto it and oversimplifying it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and as you said, I think because they went into so many different crazy supernatural stories with these random side characters that we don't really feel invested in, and we
Mm-hmm.
never really find out what happens to all of them.
Yeah.
I just felt like it took away from the series, so that there were so many questions at the end. And as much as I'm there with you, I think, like, sure, it's not real life though, it's fantasy, and this was fantasy to the extreme, and I would have liked to have seen some resolution. Or why did you introduce it in the first place?
Yeah. You
Why
had
not
some of
just
the
stick with what we already know about that world?
Yeah, exactly. And plus, there were some characters who, were new, but I found myself getting invested in their storyline. For example, you had Rebecca slash Becky, who was the daughter
Mhm.
of Shelly and Bobby, who
Yeah,
she's into drugs and she gets into like, some bad stuff herself, which is kind of like history repeating.
right,
Her generation, related to her mother's generation, had their own
right.
things. And her
And the same
storyline is
that
left
abusive
hanging.
sorry,
Yeah, oh,
sorry,
I'm
go ahead.
sorry. No, no, no. You're right. Another abusive relationship, like just like her
Yeah,
mother had
like
been in
just
with
Leo
Leo.
and Chili.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Leo's now. There's something too. Now Leo, we never found out what happened with Leo. Because in the last time we had seen him in the original series, I think Wyndham Earl had him captive, and a bunch of like
Yeah.
tarantulas or spiders fell on him. And what I thought was interesting, though, is I say that there were no answers. Some answers were presented in a book put out. I don't know if you know about the tie-in
Oh,
books that came out
I
with the return.
don't. I'm gonna
Prior
have to take
to,
notes on this.
well, I'm going to show you some stuff here. Prior to
Great.
the return coming out, shortly before the return, I don't remember exactly how much time it was, there was a book published by Mark Frost called The Secret History of Twin Peaks. I don't know if how well it can be
Oh,
seen on my screen, but
yeah.
that came out and that actually delved into just what it says. You got a lot of history of Twin Peaks, the forefathers there, and maybe some ancestors of the characters that we got to know in the popular series. And then the one where I was alluding to there being answers, after the return aired, you had a much smaller book coming out called Twin Peaks: The Final Dossier, and it was also by Mark
Oh,
Frost. And this actually gives you a little bit of history as to what happened to a degree in the 25 years between the original series and the return. And
oh,
also a
that's
little
great.
bit of like they actually address Audrey Horn's character, like a little bit more information
Oh,
about what happened to her and some other things too. And we mentioned Annie earlier,
mhm.
who was the character played by Heather Graham, who Coop was involved with. I think she was what's her name's younger sister too, the Norma's
Oh, she was
half
half
sister.
sister
Yeah,
of
half sister of
Norma.
Norma.
Yeah,
Yeah, and they mentioned actually what happened with her character in there. And while I thoroughly enjoyed that when I read it, I think it's great that I got some answers.
yeah,
You shouldn't have to go to another source for that. You
right.
shouldn't have to watch a series or a movie and then to find out more, you have to read another book. It kind of makes me think
Yeah,
now of all the Marvel movies. If you can't watch a Marvel TV series unless you've seen seven other Marvel movies, you have to have it
right.
all. I mean, it's fun if you want to like really be into all those different things, but it ends up
Yeah.
costing you a lot of money.
Totally. I definitely want to read both of those though. And I should say too, as a disclaimer, I keep bringing up Lynch and not bringing up Mark Frost at all. I mean, Mark Frost is brilliant
Yeah.
and has so much. has so much responsibility for that world as well. It was really a joint thing, even though Lynch kind of is the name that people associate with it. It really was a collaborative effort, and Mark Frost is wonderful. So
I agree, and I think he doesn't really maybe get the recognition he deserves sometimes because you do always hear more about Lynch because Lynch was already a popular personality and director and writer
right.
before Twin Peaks. But yeah, Mark Frost. I know he has novels out that he has written. I believe some are more like fantasy, sci-fi. I keep meaning
Mhm.
to check them out, but I haven't read any of them yet.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah, but there's just so much stuff out there. And one other thing I want to talk about too before we leave is you mentioned before we did the show, you and I were talking that you've done some cool research and writing involving the world of Twin Peaks. You want to tell our audience a little bit about that?
Oh yeah, it's not that exciting, but I was
I
writing. I
disagree.
was as a as a freelance writer, was hired to write restaurant guides, and then like city guides for all of those areas, kind of north of Seattle. So it was like Snoqualmie, North Bend,
Wow.
Fall City, and really, it was really cool because I got to interview people. Like I got to interview the co-owner of Tweed's Cafe, which is very authentically the Double R diner.
Oh, that's
Um,
wonderful.
and I just got to know how like the lore has impacted a lot of businesses in the area and still does today, and how they still have such a tourism draw. I mean, it's a beautiful area of the
Oh, it
country,
is. Yeah.
but based on that. So, but I want to hear about, because you've actually gone to these places. I have
Yeah.
not been to Seattle in years, and that's definitely on my US bucket list, is to go back and do all the Twin Peaks stuff. But
Well, I only did a little bit of the Twin Peaks stuff. I understand, I've belonged to a couple different Twin Peaks groups on Facebook and other places throughout the years where I've seen people they do everything that was anything that was filmed for Twin Peaks. They visited the places. Now, where I went to Tweed's Cafe, which was great. Which you said was the Double R. Is that what it is? Double R Diner.
yeah,
Yeah,
Double R Diner.
it was so cool. It was so cool. I loved it. I know my wife and I pulled up there. We actually went there in 2017, a little bit before the series aired, but of course it had already been filmed at that point, and it was pretty
Mhm.
cool. In the back of the place, there's a painting on the back of the building itself where it's got sort of like the famous background or the famous shot you see, like as if you're entering Twin Peaks. And I stood next to it. I have a photo of me next to it, and I know I look like the biggest nerd in the world, but I know people do this every day there. Matter of fact, when we went in there, it was great because you see the diner. You've seen so much in the movie in Fire Walk with Me, and of course in the TV series. It was a prominent place seen in those. And I made sure I got a cup of coffee like Dale Cooper because it was the damn
Yep.
fine coffee or damn hot coffee, whatever it is.
Damn
Cherry
fine.
pie, and it was just so cool to be there. And then we also went to the setting of where the Great Northern Hotel was, which was, of course, was run by Benjamin Horne. That was another thing too. I wish his story in The Return had been a little bit more, I don't know, detailed, and it was
Developed.
another one left
Yeah,
hanging a little bit.
I agree.
Um, but yeah, you had who was it in there? The Judd, Ashley Judd. She was in
Yeah.
there with
Yep.
Ben Horn. But anyway, I digress. But we didn't go into that place. It is a restaurant, but that's where the waterfall is, of course, where you see at the beginning of the opening credits of the series. So we shot videos, my wife Lisa and I, of that and photos of ourselves. And it was just so wonderful to be there. As Sarah had said, it's this beautiful part of the country. I just love it, and I know that that's kind of something we've even considered maybe moving out to Washington State someday, and I probably want to be
Yeah.
around there.
You know
It's
what? It's
so
so
cool.
funny for me because like I feel really drawn to the Pacific Northwest. However, I could not deal with that much rain per
Yeah,
year.
I agree.
So, like, because I'm, now I'm in the mountains, but I'm a coastal girl at heart. I love the mountains so much that when work or other things have called me away, so I have moved away from Colorado since first moving here a couple of times. But each time I miss the mountains so desperately, like I feel it in my bones. I'm like, I have to go back. If Colorado had an ocean, it would be the
It'd be
perfect
perfect,
place.
huh?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's this beautiful part of the country. It's someplace that I want to revisit. Who knows? Maybe we'll end up there at the same time.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
I did want to say one other thing I wanted to mention though was one thing that's very prominent in all the versions of Twin Peaks is the music. And
Hmm.
the original soundtrack is still one of my from that covered the first season of the original series. Is still one of my favorite soundtracks ever. I listen to it
Oh
frequently.
yeah.
The theme song, of course, is iconic. There's a version of the theme song with vocals sung by Julie Cruz, who appeared in multiple episodes, called "Falling," which is just wonderful. I think it was used in one episode.
It was, yeah.
Yeah,
And that's Julie Cruz. I mean, she was Lynch's muse. I mean, he
yeah.
used her throughout his films. Did you know I was when I was kind of looking up stuff about her, I had no idea that she was in the B-52s for 2 years. Did you know
Yeah, I
that?
just recently found that out too because I
Yeah.
think the original one of the original vocals, Cindy Wilson. I think she had
Yeah.
just recently had a child, so she wasn't touring with them. And I think, yeah, Julie Cruz was in there.
Yeah.
I want to
I
see
had
some
no
videos of
idea.
that because I that would be pretty awesome to see.
Right, and that voice, I mean, just that's she it's so haunting and ethereal and plain though, very
Yeah,
like it's so raw that it's like what sounds like on a surface, like on paper sounds like a calming feature is almost like heartbreaking to hear.
yes. Oh, it is.
She's
Yeah.
just so she's just in her own world, and I like, yeah, she was amazing.
Yeah, she was. And there was one song, I think it was in the episode that I mentioned earlier, where the giant appeared to Cooper at the Roadhouse. And
Mhm.
she's on stage performing then, and she's doing this song called Rockin' Back Inside My Heart. And it's kind of got like this upbeat kind of sound to it, but still it's haunting the way she sings it. She was such an amazing entertainer. And unfortunately, she has passed as well. I can't remember when that was, just in the past
Last
couple
year.
years. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was last year.
Yeah.
She
So.
took her own life, unfortunately.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, that's so
Yeah,
sad.
just a
So,
lot of she had been struggling with lupus and depression and various
oh,
forms of addiction kind of throughout her life, and the
oh, that's
I
so
guess
very
they
sad. I
wanted
didn't realize that. I feel for
yeah.
her and anyone going through that. But yeah, so much great music in the original. And then one of the things that I liked the most about the return was the music that was used in there. Most of the episodes ended with with the scene like at the Roadhouse, and you see different bands and performers on stage. And look at for the audio listeners, you're not seeing this, but Sarah has a big smile on her face. It looks like you like music too.
Oh my gosh, I geeked out, especially because it was like stuff like Nine Inch Nails and Eddie Vedder
Yeah.
and Sharon Von Etten, who I love. I mean,
Oh
she's
yeah.
a throwback. The first song, I don't know how you feel about her, but like the first song that I ever heard by her was, I think it's called 17.
Oh,
And it's
okay.
so reminds me of like 80s kind of new wavy vocalist, like almost has this like Pat Benatar quality to
Oh,
it.
nice.
He's great. And then of course I'll let you talk about your favorite that you found.
Okay. Well, I like so much of it. I know I actually printed out, I guess, the different musicians that were on the show that appeared on there, and you heard their music. One that a couple of these I had never heard of before. There's a group called the Chromatics.
They're awesome.
Excuse me. They are awesome. They did a great song in episode 2 called Shadow. And then there was another one called Saturday in another episode. There's a guy in there in that band named Johnny Jewel who does a lot of instrumental stuff too. I think he did stuff throughout the series too. And he's got both, he as a solo artist and Chromatics are great. There was a group in one of the early episodes called the Cactus Blossoms doing a song called Mississippi. And I love that. The one though that Sarah was referring to is I always struggle with how to say, is it au
Au
revoir?
revoir.
Au
Au
revoir? Yeah.
revoir.
Yeah.
Au revoir,
Simone.
Simone.
Yeah. Well, that's a group that appeared in 2 episodes. And they did a song called Lark in the 4th one, and then A Violent Yet Flammable World in part 9. And they got their name actually from the movie Pee Wee's Big Adventure. There was this character in that
So
named
cool.
Simone, and when her and Pee Wee were saying goodbye to each other, he said that. He said au revoir. I don't
Au
know why I struggle with
revoir.
that. It's a
That was
Delaware
my
thing, I
that was
guess.
my Pee-wee voice, by the way. It was terrible, but I try. I try my best.
No. But au revoir, Simone, and that's where they got their name from. Which if you're gonna get your name from a Pee Wee Herman movie, Bravo.
Yes.
I love it. I love it. Then you had, there was actually a group in there in the fifth episode that David Lynch's son Riley performed with. He has a
Oh,
band
I didn't
called Trouble. Yeah. And he played guitar for this band. And like you said, Sharon Von Etten, Nine Inch Nails, Hudson Mohawk,
The
Rebecca Del
Veils.
Rio.
The
Hmm?
Veils in episode 15.
Oh, yes,
They're
that's right.
fantastic. Yeah.
And then well, I can't not mention this one. James Marshall as James Hurley doing Just
Yeah.
You, which was a song from the original series that people either love it or they hate it. A lot of people hated when he did that. And I think it was towards the beginning of season 2 where he was singing this in the home of, I want to say, Donna.
Yeah.
Or Maddie, and it's just him with the guitar, and they're singing background. And I always thought it was kind of sweet in the original episode. And then he
I thought it
appears
was
doing this.
cheesy.
Would you say?
I thought it was super cheesy.
Oh, it was super cheesy. Yeah, it was very super cheesy. Somehow I like it though. Like you said, the Veils and the Eddie Vedder, who is introduced in it about as his real name
Yep.
in Twin Peaks. They say as Edward Louis Severson III. And then Julie Cruz, of course, came back for part 17, doing The World Spins, which was a song from the original. And
Mhm.
the music was fantastic. I love the music in that. I love the music in the original soundtrack. Just recently, I found out that they had put out a soundtrack for the second season of the original Twin Peaks. And that's got some good stuff, including Just You by James Hurley, and mostly the instrumental stuff, which was done by the great and late, was it Angelo Badalamenti? Or I don't know how
Yeah.
you say his name.
Badalamenti. I could practice it
Say it
saying it
again.
earlier because it was like Angelo Badalamenti.
Bravo. Bravo, Sarah.
Thank you. On a somewhat related note, unpaid product placement, but I do want to give it out too for any hardcore fans who are still listening. Tweed's Cafe will ship full pies for you anywhere in the country, and they're amazing, including a cherry pie. So if you're
That is
doing any kind of
awesome.
Dale Cooper themed party or Twin Peaks party, or you just have a huge avid fan in your life and you want to get them a pie,
I think that's
they're available.
wonderful. I really think
Yeah,
that's wonderful. You said you got
yeah.
a pie for your sister, was that right?
I
Or
don't want to talk about the
oh, okay.
pie. The pie.
There's a story there. But yeah, well, that sounds really cool. I'm gonna have to look into that.
Yeah, definitely.
That's
You'll have to let me
awesome.
know what you
I
think.
will. I will. And we could probably. I've got. I don't. I know you have notes. I've got lots of notes here. There's a lot more we could do, but I think we're in a good spot to wrap this one up, Sarah. And for all you Twin Peaks fans out there, I thank you so much for listening and watching to this. And I'm going to keep my fingers crossed. For however long I can to hope for a fourth season for Twin Peaks or some sort of another movie or something. I think that would be wonderful. I know
Yes.
there's been different things where information has come out that Lynch has been working on secret projects, and people are like, "Is it Twin Peaks? Are we going to get some announcement that he's filmed a new movie and just not told anybody?" And who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I'll never be satiated. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
you keep them coming, I'll be happy with it. Even if it's terrible, I'll be happy with it.
exactly, exactly. And I love that so many of the cast members too are really into it. Like I know I follow some on Instagram and other places where they're very interactive with the fans. They go to different like conferences and shows and just love the work that they did so much, and that's wonderful to see. Oh, I did want to make one more reference to the return that I meant to bring up that I enjoyed was Michael Cera had a small role in that.
Yes, I totally forgot about that. He was Andy and Lucy's son.
He was Andy and Lucy's son. He was just in one episode. He was their son Wally, who imagined himself as like the 1950s version of Marlon Brando, and he talked just like him. He had like the pauses that Brando was known for. He sounded like him. He had a motorcycle like I think Brando did in a movie called The Wild Ones, and it's just one episode, but he's so very good in it.
I'm so glad you brought him up. I totally forgot that. Yeah, he was awesome.
Yeah, I think he was Wally Brando. I think he went by Wally Brando
Yes,
instead of,
I think you're
yeah.
right.
But okay, I'm going to end it on that. Like Michael Cera's had a great year this past year playing Alan in the Barbie movie, but I loved him as Wally Brando too.
Totally.
Okay, folks, I'm going to wrap this one up. I thank you again for tuning in, and go and have yourself a, just spiffy fun day, no matter what you're doing. Take care, everybody, and thank you so much, Sarah.
Thank you so much, buddy.
My pleasure. And okay, there's that stop button. Bye, folks.